everybody. It's Elite Business Live 2024. I'm your co-host, Ollie Barrett, and we're talking all things marketing, communications, and PR as well. I'm joined by a stellar group of guests, including beaming into our room virtually. We've just been hearing a fantastic keynote. Thank you again, Arti Halai. Very, very good food for thought. It's very nice to see you. Next to you, we have Stephanie, Melodia. Melodia. Now, you're the founder of Bloom, and that's an award-winning marketing agency, but also the co-founder of BOMBA, which I'm fascinated by. So, a creative studio for explosive brands. Tell me more about explosive.
Yeah, in today's day and age, there's so much noise, and brand, I think, has been very overlooked in this overhyped era of performance marketing. And so, you know, emotion is Latin for margin, as I like to say, which is, you know, the secret to that is brands, and the explosive brand is what's going to cut through the noise.
Love it. So we'll talk more about this. You also, I note, host the CEO Stories podcast, featuring the good, the bad, and the ugly of building a business. I had a little tune in last week, actually. I commend it to you. Right, who's next door? Well, Sophie Milliken needs no introduction to Elite Business fans. You're actually such a supporter of this event, so thank you, Sophie. You co-founded the MOJA Group, the award. You're an award-winning entrepreneur as well. You were dishing out awards last night at the EB 100. Thank you. And you're really, I think, Sophie, all about boosting business owners' profiles. You also wrote the Ambition Accelerator. What was the Ambition Accelerator about?
So that was my lockdown project. It was my second book, and that was aimed specifically at young women, actually, to encourage them to be really bold with their careers, whatever that choice might be. Yeah.
Thank you for writing it. I hope we can share. We should share all of these on our socials as well. Jason, good to see you. Thank you for being with us today. A serial entrepreneur, an investor. You also host a podcast, the Always Free podcast. Free in that meaning?
Free as in free to be who you want to be.
Love it. Yeah. And one other meaning of that word, you were financially free, I believe, by the time you were 30. What? Give us a loan. You built multiple businesses, and you also run a program, I believe, to help people achieve their true financial freedom. What sort of people tend to sign up?
Normally people who are between above 35 years old, good at earning money, but don't have quite as much to show for it as they thought they would by now. So not so good at managing money and building wealth.
Excellent. So very intriguing. We'll come back to this. And by no means least, Jacob joins us down the line. Jacob Nomafo, who's the co-founder of LucidMeme. Can you hear us, Jacob?
I can. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, you're all about Gen Z engagement on social media. You're backed by the extremely outspoken Gary Vee. All about, your agency tends to be all about conveying information in a succinct, digestible format. What's another way of saying what you end up creating?
Yeah, I mean, so we're all about memes. Memes are essentially a mechanism to create connection. So that's what we do for brands. We help forward-thinking brands connect with their target audience in an authentic way.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. Right, let's get straight into it, because we've got lots of time for questions, so keep them coming online and in our studio here. What's one thing you just wish more people understood about PR and marketing? And you can be as blunt as you like. Stephanie, I can see you almost stretching up for this. Come on.
So you mentioned in the intro that I used to run a marketing agency called Bloom for about 6 years, and I was more of a teacher than an agency owner during that time. I felt like there was so much education. I think for me, one thing is that marketing is not simply interchangeable with social media. There's that instant expectation, oh, it's just social, it's some dark arts, it's some dark magic on social. Actually, I'm going to recycle a little pearl of wisdom from someone called Matt Lerner, who's just released a book, I'm not on commission, but called Growth Levers. He was head of growth at PayPal, and he has this concept which is called the locksmith moment. And the quick story, if I've got time, is while he was in San Francisco building PayPal, when he was on his way home, stopped at his apartment block and noticed just above his keypad when he was going in after a long day at work, a new sticker that he'd never noticed before. And it was a locksmith advertising his services. And he was like, brainwave, light bulb moment. that is the locksmith moment. If I'm ever caught out and I ever need a locksmith services, that's exactly where I need it. And so breaking it down for businesses, depending on where you are in your journey, the big part of marketing that everyone overlooks is market.
Yes.
Where is your market?
Where
Who
are you
are they? Where
placing
are
that
they?
message?
And what is your locksmith moment? It's a simple start from there, not from social media, not from the tactics.
Love it. Now, I can see you nodding along there, Jacob. What would you say the one thing that you wish more people understood would be?
Yeah, I'd say, just to add to that, yeah, kind of the power of reverse engineering, really picturing what the message you're trying to get across means to the person. I'm way more kind of well-versed in social media versus other forms of marketing. So I'd say in that respect, literally it can come down to picturing where they see your content. Are they on the bus on the way home from work? What mindset are they in? And then you can reverse engineer from how it lands, and then you can be a lot more kind of targeted and strong with your messaging.
I'm intrigued by that. So what's an example of how you've done that in a way that's worked for a client?
So I'd say lots of very kind of topical, after a long day of work, you're sitting there on the bus and you're thinking, God, I'm tired. I'm a bit fed up. So, there's lots of meme content around having a long day at work, kind of going through the less kind of fun bits. So yeah, for example, talking on a specific moment, that relatable moment which you may have experienced in work, and then gets to 5:30, you're on the bus and you see it and you think, that's me, I've had that today. And there you've connected with an experience which they've lived
understood.
2 hours ago.
I like it. Okay, so let's just keep this sort of thought starters going. Jason, what's that one thing?
One thing for me is keeping the marketing, or keeping your message true to who you're trying to connect with, pretty similar to what you just said. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of companies that think they need to please everyone, and they might get a comment or a bit of feedback, and they'll try and adapt their product or service to suit that person, rather than going, well, this person loves it, that person doesn't really like it. Instead of trying to keep them happy, how about we just find more of them? Because the moment you try and keep everyone happy, the more you start to dilute your service into the noise, and you're also moving further away from yourself. You're trying to build something that you didn't deliberately build in the first place.
Personal question, has it ever paid you to be deliberately divisive?
Deliberately divisive? Yeah, absolutely. Everything that I've ever done has been built around a projective opinion of mine and my values, and I specifically speak to people who understand me and resonate with me, and the rest, I'm not worried about.
So what's an example? What's an example of a message that you have put out into the world that you knew would distance, maybe even turn off quite a few people, but you knew that your own market would resonate?
We only have half hour, I think.
Let's cut to the point.
I go against the status quo, as in things like, don't get on the property ladder if you want financial freedom, things like that. And although there's some context behind it and why, some reasoning behind it, it makes people's ears perk up. And when I start suggesting situations that they're in as a result of trying to get on the property ladder, or learning to drive in a manual car instead of an automatic car because their dad told them to, because it was better for their dad. Now they're driving an automatic, and all cars are going automatic. So it's
there is something of a rhyme here, Arti, isn't there, around the sort of man bites dog, that counter-intuition. I just wonder anything we draw out from that, from your perception, perspective about how you catch imagination, really.
I think creativity, curiosity, critical thinking, these are the fundamental skill sets that we need in today's day and age, whether it's in business, whether it's in education. But so really, your imagination can be as wide and broad as you want it to be, but fundamentally in business, that's not the way it works, because you've got to have something that is relatable to your market and your audience. So if you are able to find that thing that's relatable, then you can play in that space.
Okay, so yes, and Jason's talking about this idea of a provocative hook, which a lot of people disagree with, but he knows will get attention. To what extent does that play well to a broadcaster's ear?
Yeah, well, it's magic for a broadcaster's ear, because, for us, it's like, wow, that's great. That could make a great story, because we're all about those attention-seeking stories that are going to get a conversation going.
All right.
For the business, it might not work as well. I think you have to be very careful.
Well, careful is the word I'm gonna hook on. I want your one thought, Sophie, but your eyebrows both shot up at this point. Because I suspect there are traps not to fall into here.
Well, yes, definitely. And back to the question around the one thing, for me, I would look at it with a PR lens. And I think the one thing that I would like people to understand about PR in particular is that it's not guaranteed. And that you should have some goals around what it is that you want to achieve that are realistic, that aren't just about getting coverage in X, Y, and Z, because that just doesn't happen.
So what's an example of a type of outcome, if we're broadening that lens, that we should be as interested in as the column inch?
So for me, because we work with business owners and with corporates as well to raise their profiles across a variety of ways, that's what creates the story. So if someone comes to me and says, I just want to put out a press release about this thing, I try and persuade them not to do that, because unless it's got a controversial or exciting or topical hook, it's not going to get picked up. So for me, it's all the other things that actually make that person interesting. And then when there's a story to tell, that's the point to try and push it out.
Right, so we're going to cover more on this, but also on marketing in particular. I would just love to know from you, Jacob, you've told us about putting yourself in the shoes of the person seeing the meme. Any top tip for getting the most out of these really short formats?
Yeah, I mean, you know, adding to what we've spoken about with the hooks and the kind of relationships, I'd say a really important thing is the symbiosis. It's often overlooked. Very easy to put out content, push it out, but relationships are built with the two-way street. So it has to be that you have to constantly be listening and iterating, very hands-on, and, you know, obviously spoken about not kind of excluding anyone. We call them safe. For example, with memes, they have to be safe. There's no swearing. They have to align, no fantasism. It can't present extreme viewpoints, and it can't exclude anyone. And that's kind of the recipe to keeping everyone happy.
No swearing. Does your backer Gary V agree with all of those?
Yeah, that's a very good question. No comment.
Okay, no effing comment. Right, fine. Okay, thank you, Josie. All right. Well, we'll take some questions very shortly from here in London and online as well. Stephanie, we have heard, and I think you've already used that phrase of sort of performance marketing. Mm. How big a believer are you in performance marketing?
Out of 10, it has its place. I am not a nutritionist by any means, but I do use the food analogy with this type of thing. There has been overexcitement in recent years because it has the instant gratification, because there's also this clutching to the numbers and the data, the analytics, like a safety blanket as well. And so really now I think we're starting to see is that performance marketing, i.e. paid social, PPC, is a game won by those with the deepest pockets, i.e. the biggest budgets. And speaking of pockets, we're continuing to line the pockets of the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, Alphabet, by continuing to funnel the cash down that route. So back to the nutritionist analogy, I kind of compare it to that sugar fix, that quick instant rush. You know, it's a Snickers bar in the mid-afternoon slump, but it has its time and place as part of a well-rounded meal, if you like. Yeah.
Well, so, a Mars a day and all that, but it sounds like you're saying that it does work in that short term.
It does have its place. It does have its place, but it does need to be part of a more holistic view that doesn't overlook the core value proposition.
Yeah, so I'm trying to pack in lots of sort of stimulus for questions, but Jason, while we're on that point around performance marketing, something you've learned the hard way, something you wish you'd doubled down on sooner?
Yeah, my approach to business has always been to share as much as you possibly can with a question in mind of, if I share this piece of content with them, how can I share it in a way that they won't need me anymore? And they won't need to buy anything from me. And as a result of doing that, we've, albeit played a bit of a longer game, but we've ended up generating more revenue than we could ever generate because it's people ultimately just pay for the implementation.
Really interesting.
So all you've got to do is build up the trust. So the longer that someone can spend with you and get a lot of value from you, they literally just believe that you're the only person in the world that could possibly get them the result that they want. So therefore, they just want to pay just to get that inch closer to you.
Really interesting. Okay, so just very briefly, Sophie, to what extent do these worlds cross over? You're raising individuals' profiles, individuals advertising themselves, paying to promote themselves, or is that a bit crass?
Well, it depends who finds out about it, I suppose. But, I mean, I'm not a fan of paying to promote yourself, because I think a lot of what we talk about around personal messaging is around being authentic, which is a word that I kind of hear too much probably, but it does resonate with most of us. We want to be ourselves, and what we don't want to do is to create a version of ourselves that we pay to do certain things and get exposure, and then actually the real version of us is completely different, because that message just doesn't add up. So
I suppose what I'm struggling with on that, and Arti, please, I'd love your help on this, is communication is about deciding what not to say. And so there will be times when you withhold information by not saying something that you're thinking or worried about. So how do we decide what not to say, given we want to take our teams with us? Give us some advice.
It's an interesting one. So if I give you the example of what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, okay? So that's controversial. And what I say to business leaders is, okay, your clients, your customers, the people that matter to you, are they interested? Do they want you to have a position on this? And that's the way to think about it. Because if they haven't, then don't comment on it. You get no favors. You do yourself no favors. So I think you have to really think from the business perspective, these are my clients, these are my customers, and, you know, does it matter to them? Because otherwise, I think what you'll do is you'll find yourself getting into deep water over it.
All right, so just briefly building on that, Sophie, I mean, Ben & Jerry's could easily have said, our customers care about ice cream when it comes to what we talk about. They chose to think differently and continue to, and they will speak about refugees, to give one of many examples. How do we tread a line between what we choose to talk about and what we don't? I mean, I take Arti's point, but there's still a lot of filtering to be done there.
There is, and I guess that's where you need to make a decision as to what you stand for and how safe you play it. And I think if we were to relate it to people that are listening today, if you're unsure about how far to go with things, it's thinking about who have you got around you that actually talks sense, that you can maybe go and run things by. I mean, I can be quite controversial sometimes, I think, on LinkedIn, so I've got strong opinions about lots of things. And there's been the odd time where I've written a post and I've given it to a member of my team and said, can you just check this is going to be okay? Am I going to offend certain people by posting this, or am I going to get sued by the last business that I sold? Because that tends to...
In what sense is it bad to offend people? Just so
well, I guess it depends in what context. Usually for me, I've spoken quite openly about the exit I had after selling my first business, which was quite painful for me, and probably for them a bit as well. And so I like to share those stories because I think other people can learn from being in that position, but I have to be careful in case they do sue me.
Understood. And by the way, Jacob, my next question when we all come back in is, bland doesn't get shared, right? So I'd like your advice on where the line is, how we decide, and of course it depends, but I want your experience on this, please. Let's take some questions. I've seen an offer there, and I see an offer here, and there as well. We'll come to the second row, but let's start on the front row. I see a great British entrepreneur, Kim, in the front row, and in my field of vision, which helps, but I haven't not spotted you there.
Hello, that was brilliant. I'm Kim Antonio, and we've built what I can only liken to Siri for reading, where we're helping children with fluency and reading skills. Thank you, Arti. I actually defined that beautifully from your keynote earlier. You were my question, so thank you. So my question is, I understand what you were saying about being really polar-focused about knowing your audience, but when you've got an audience that's both B2C and B2C with a completely different value proposition for both, how do you tackle that?
So B2C and B2B, Kim, yeah, right. So a bit of, that's interesting. All right. Stephanie, do you want to have a quick crack at that? I can't give every question to every panellist because I want to make progress. Stephanie, do you mind?
It is actually a question that comes up quite often. You'd be surprised how much I do get asked because on the one hand, best practice is to make that impact. I love what you were saying before, Jason, you know, if you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. But then, of course, you've got different segments to speak to, and you risk diluting that message. So there's a great messaging framework called the Messaging House, where you really keep the focus on the customer benefits, i.e. what's in it for them. And if there's a bit of a Venn diagram, if you can ladder it up to ultimately more of kind of the wider benefit if you're looking at kind of your homepage and certain channels where you can't kind of pick and choose who you're speaking to, but then in campaigns you can be very targeted and specific. So you've got to play the channels and tactics accordingly, but it is that overlap, like your website homepage, for example, where you need to find what's that overlap that kind of gets the bullseye for both.
There's so much more I want to unpack on all these, but I really want more questions. So let's go to the second row here. Thank you, nice to see you. Feel free to say who you are, you don't have to. Sorry, we can't get more on that.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Danny Barber, the founder of Steam Arena, and we're going to fix the education system. What would your advice be to a passionate dad of 4 incredible daughters to make our idea explode?
And your idea being transform the education system.
We're creating spaces across the nation for children to come and get involved in creative problem-solving activities.
Right. So we're going to give Danny some first-class free marketing advice now. No pressure, team.
I know I answered the last question, so I apologise for hogging the mic, but just as you kind of touched on my keyword there, the explosiveness. So a recent report came out, which was really interesting, between differentiation versus distinctiveness. Now, without getting too geeky about marketing, I used to believe that USPs were overrated because there's so much competition, it's such a noisy space that...
USP, unique selling points.
Unique selling points, so what makes you do? I was like, whatever. But this recent report came out that showed that actually the earliest stages of business, i.e. like very much startup, differentiation, i.e. what makes you stand out from the crowd, to the previous points around, you know, what will get shared, what will get people talking, is much more important. As you start to enter the scale-up phase, that's where distinctiveness, i.e. what are your specific suite of brand assets that you clearly and consistently communicate over and over and over until everyone's sick of it, builds that recognition. But to begin with that differentiation, the root of that is what's your brand personality and your mission. You've obviously got a fantastic mission, so double down on that.
All right, so live workshop. Danny, back to you. What is the one thing that makes your brilliant project stand out? Top of the head.
I think it is our purpose. Our purpose is on culture, it's on empowerment, it's on transparency. We're doing it for the right reasons. We're a community interest company.
Right on the mic. Okay.
We're all about social value. We want to give back. It's our gift to the nation.
All right, but is that, Danny, we support what you're doing. What's his name again?
Steam Arena.
Steam Arena. There you go. I'm promoting it, so I'm allowed to say cheekily, isn't that everyone's mission these days? Purpose, everyone's mission. Is it different enough? Just be as blunt as you like, Jason, because we're trying to help Danny here.
I think it is wildly different to what what the educational sector is promoting. I think if we just teach kids to follow a goal that's aligned with who they really love to be and who they want to be, that's the first stepping stone. And then setting goals, and then teaching them how to deliver results and get paid on results rather than exchanging time for money.
To be continued. Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much, Danny. Let's go across the aisle here. We're just going into our final sort of 5 or 6 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I'm a marketing consultant, plus I'm also a trustee of a charity organisation that helps young people. Very passionate about that and aligns with what I do. My question would be, all of you support businesses with marketing their products and services. Do you struggle to market yourself? Or have you struggled to market yourself?
Interesting question. Who'd like to have a go at that? Go on, Sophie.
So this is how I actually created my current business, MOJA, because I was doing that in my first business without realizing that I was doing it. So for me, it was a snowball effect, and it's something that I believe that everybody can do. So in my first business, very, very different to what I do now, I became really well known within the graduate employability industry. So it was things like I wrote a book for students that then got me a column in a careers magazine. I got offered 2 TEDx talks. I wrote another book. I was on this podcast. I was on TV. I was on the radio. And all these things happened, and there was no clear strategy around it other than I just kept saying yes to stuff and started enjoying it. And I think that is the key to it. So I now do it intentionally, and I do it for other people. And I think that is what has the biggest impact on business. And I think back to your question, that's what you need to do. You've got a really bold statement, and it's how do you do it and how do you tell stories?
So I would love your take on this as well, Jacob, if you don't mind, because you're connecting with a particular generation, if you like, but I want to know what your top advice is.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that from Sophie, and I completely agree. It's such a weird one. There's almost like you hold yourself back when you're marketing yourself. I feel like I speak for many people. It's very different than marketing an apple or an orange. I think going back to what we touched on already, be yourself, be authentic, know what you bring to the table, what's your value, and be solid in that, and let your kind of personality do the talking. And yeah, as Sophie said, put yourself in those situations, and then hopefully that
If, for example, on that, Jacob, let's just say you're riddled with doubt. When is it all right to say something you don't fully believe?
I don't think you. I think you should only really say stuff you believe. Like, then you need to look at yourself and then build that wall of confidence by way of evidence. What have I done to prove that I have this knowledge? And then you can sit back and be like,
so the idea of an entrepreneur saying, we are going to do this, even though they don't fully believe it, is a no.
I wouldn't go as black and white as that. Yeah, you have to, yeah,
what a business plan is.
Naturally you do have to.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's what we have in common, right? Is we do have that optimism, but it's just that, and we have that optimism because we're sure of ourselves. Very fine line.
Not to go totally philosophical, there's a difference between knowing something to be false and not fully believing it to be true. So I think that there are lines there on that. Let's take a final question from the room, and I see it. I took, I think, one question from you yesterday, so I'm going to get a new voice in, and I hope to share it around a bit more, please. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm an AI architect at one of the big tech companies. I'm exploring the potential of entrepreneurship in my future. A lot of the stories that you see online are about rags to riches stories, but for someone who's actually in a very comfortable position, how do you make that step?
What a great question. Who would like to have a go?
How do you make the step into entrepreneurship? Yeah, if you've come from a corporation, I think it's very difficult because corporation does provide you with some padding and some security, and you're not able to move as fast because you have to go through processes and, all the rest of it. So I do believe that corporations can be damaging to people wanting to go into the entrepreneurial space. However, what Jacob was saying about believing in your product and being sure of what the value is you have to offer, that should give you enough kind of springboard to go and get a result for one person, and then another person, and another person. That gives you the kind of belief that you've got something of value.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. Very briefly, Arti, I've got one final question.
This is very much around your appetite for risk as well, I think. And risk is something that, if you don't want to take it on your own, don't feel you have to do it on your own. You can always partner with somebody else. That's what I did. My business partner was 10 years ahead of the game from me.
And we heard from Charlie Rogers here yesterday about the side hustle. So flip that round, maybe one step at a time. Jacob, we want to create content that's provocative, that not, gratuitously so, but sparks imagination. How do we know where the line is?
Very good question. I don't know if I can't actually. Well, I can't run 100K right now. I couldn't go out and do it, but I can run 1, I can run 5. Keep on pushing the lines and work towards that goal. Keep on going step by step. And then, the lines there, work your way up.
Hang on, isn't that just a recipe to get cancelled? It's like, push it.
No, I mean, this is the thing. I mean,
blown up. What's that smell of smoke?
People often think memes are these kind of, it's one way to kill your reputation, but any post can do that. Any piece of content can do that. But yeah, just be cautious, take steps to get there. And that's why we exist, for example, to help companies know where that line is and get as close to it as possible.
All right, well, that's lucidmeme.com, etc. No, this is good. Thank you, Jacob. All right, very briefly, Jason,
I was just going to finish on your note that some large companies have been cancelled as a result of trying to please everyone.
Oh, that's interesting. Who are you thinking of there?
I won't mention, but, some alcoholic drink companies and some, yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no.
They've tried to please everyone and therefore been cancelled from their loyal following.
All right, well, on that, I'm afraid we don't have time for another round. Probably good not to name them, thank you. But I wish we did have more time. We don't, but I think this panel was fascinating and really good. And that is, in many ways, thanks to the brilliant keynote that kicked it all off. So I say thank you to Arti, thank you to Stephanie, to Sophie, to Jason, and of course to Jacob. Thank you very much indeed.